Welcome, dear listeners, to a podcast that's about to transform the way you lead, the way you grow and thrive in your life and career. Get ready to embark on a journey filled with inspiration and self-discovery. This is Afsheen, the host of the Getting Real podcast. And this season, I'm delighted to be joined by none other than my co-host, Vicki Davitashvili. Vicki?
Are you ready to embrace the joy of leadership, the power of self-discovery, and the limitless potential of your career, and ultimately your entire life? Join us on this incredible journey of transformation.
Yep, stay tuned because the best is yet to come. So, welcome back, listeners, for the Getting Real podcast. This is Afsheen, and as usual, this season, I'm joined by Vicki Davitashvili, and Vicki and I are going to unpack a seasonal subject. And more about seasonal a little bit later. That's super important at this time of the year because we know many organizations are undertaking this process at this time of the year as part of their annual employee life cycle. And I'm sure you've guessed it by now, we are doing performance management. We're going to have a conversation about that with each other. So Vicki, welcome back. Really excited to see you bright and early this morning. How's it going? And are you looking forward to this conversation as much as I am?
Hi, Afsheen. So good to see you and so good to see all of our listeners today. So yes, this is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. And I feel like I always say this at the kickoff of all of our conversations.
We only talk about stuff that's near and dear to our heart. Isn't that right, Vicki?
But I guess I will give you, and this is, okay, Afsheen, I know you're not expecting this, but, I will share with you that the more that I grow as a leader, the more I recognize that I am, in marketing, which is what I work in. We talk about customer obsession, right? And it's all about the customer. Well, now for me, it's all about human obsession. It's all about the human, right? Whether it's the customer, whether it's my team members, whether it's my colleagues. And so that's why this podcast is so incredibly relevant and near and dear to my heart, because we really talk about the human element of working, right? And the human element is the key driver to any type of success as a person in business, right? And so that's why I'm so incredibly excited about performance management, because this is a time for us to pause, to reflect, to recalibrate, and to really get into an even better place than where we've been. So I'm super excited about this conversation.
Yay! Likewise, I'm also, and I love what you said. This is the human element of working, and so that was you put that very nicely indeed. And speaking of human elements of working, and I know that we cover so many different aspects of human elements of working, and you and I covered sensitive conversations in the first episode of this season. And then we spoke about, we keep speaking about human elements of working. So today is our performance management and the human element of the performance management process. So I sort of have sat on both sides of this, of the table on this topic. I know how important it is for a North Star that an organization holds to be known to everyone and for everyone to know how they can contribute to the North Star of the organization. And the performance management process is such a huge enabler in that you are actually able to see what it is that you might be able to chip away at for a period of a year in order for you to help your organization and help yourself exceed, is succeed in the world. And so let's start talking about what good performance management looks like. So what does good performance management, Vicki, look like for you in your sort of perspective? And then I'll share a little bit about what I feel good performance management looks like to me.
Oh, this is a tough question, but okay. So let me give this a shot.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. So I've been on both sides of the table and I still sit on both sides of the tables, right? So I receive my own performance feedback and I have to give performance feedback. So I'm still very much in that mode in my life. Okay. Good performance management. Well, number one, I don't think that it should be a one off conversation. I think that should be a continuous cycle, right? This is a conversation that is ongoing. And, I hate the formality that sometimes goes with performance management. I understand its importance and its place, but I think that the informal conversations that you also have along the way, they are, that's what makes the 1 + 1 = 15 in an equation like that. So to me, it's a continuous conversation. You should never, ever be surprised at the end of the year when you do have the formal conversation. If you are surprised, then something is not going right, because this is a dialogue that should be ongoing with you, your manager, your peers, your colleagues. So that's to me of paramount importance. The other one is clarity and transparency. So what do I mean by that? I think you need to have clarity in terms of what it is that you're signing up, what it is that is expected of you, both from the what and the how. So meaning, what are the quantitative outcomes that are expected of you by the end of the year, as well as the qualitative, like the how. How are you doing it, right? What kind of leadership skills are you displaying as part of your performance throughout the year, or as part of the way that you work with others throughout the year? So those two are extremely important to me. And then we can delve into some frameworks that I've used around it. But that to me is, expectation setting and just really knowing how I'm trending throughout the year is super duper important.
I love that you pointed out these three key points. I'm going to call them out. You said ongoing conversation, the way that performance management needs to be done, and then clarity in terms of how important that piece is. Everybody is very aware of what's expected from a what and a how perspective. Love that. Must dive into that a little bit more. And then the final thing is, what are some great frameworks to use in order to make that possible? Because it's a really important piece. Here's what's coming up for me as you're talking about ongoing conversations. I second you. I hate the institutionalized timelines that organizations put into place that give us as managers permission to say, well, I tick that box, right? I did that conversation in December when it was required, and at mid-year as well. It's not meant to act like that. That's there as a minimum. That's what I want to say. That's there as a minimum requirement, is every individual who is in your team has a minimum right to have a detailed, deep dive conversation on how they're progressing against their goals, and hearing from you, and also hearing hearing their experiences, so that you can each partner with each other to help that person continue on the path of creating value for your organization, your team, your business. But it's just a baseline minimum requirement. And I think what's really important, and I cannot say this enough, is talk more, talk better, right? There's an organization that I've worked with, and this was our tagline for performance management: talk more, talk better. So yes, we have a minimum requirement, and here's some ways that you can take that up a notch, that you can create greater value. You can talk more often and talk more, and that goes back to your clarity point, talk more clearly, have more courageous conversations if you need more. Have more courageous conversations if you see that that person is struggling, is not able to tick the boxes that they're required to do. And I think that's sort of the the glue that enables this process, which is kind of institutionalized on this baseline timeline, to go better. And and so talk more, talk better. That's my 2 cents right now. What comes up for you, Vicki, as I share that?
I love the word that you use, courageous. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to lean into that because I do think that it's human nature for us to shy away from discomfortable or uncomfortable conversations and to say the things that need to be said. So we tiptoe around it, and then, things can get lost in translation. So I think it's incredibly important for you to be courageous as a leader. And if you have to deliver an unpleasant message, you can deliver it. But it's not in what you say. I think it's more even important in how you say it.
Right.
If you come into the conversation with empathy, if you come into the conversation with, this is still a safe space, let's just talk about what might be happening. If you come into the conversation not from an accusatory space, but from a space of let's explore this together. How can I as a leader support you? Because this is an equation of, yes, the employee is doing the doing, but you as their leader, you're there to guide, you're there to support. At least that's how I see my role being, right? And so I think that it's incredibly important in the tone that you set with the conversation. And you can say difficult things, but it's in how you say it. And it's not just about putting it all on the employee. It is creating the support infrastructure around the employee to help them succeed at the end of the day. And so, that support infrastructure can be you, like me directly. How am I helping directly? Also looking at what learning and development can we lean into? Can we find you a mentor? Where are you struggling? And really use that time as an exploratory opportunity rather than an accusatory opportunity, because that is one of the, what I call, in product management, I have these key moments of truth for the customer, like those moments that you can really affect customer sentiment towards you. And so this is the moment at which you are going to affect the employee sentiment towards you, towards the company, towards their job, right? And the work that they're doing. So you can either inspire them or you can completely deflate them. And so you look at this as an incredibly important touch point in that journey with your team members, at which point you can either completely deflate them or you can help inspire them to be the best that they can possibly be. So I'll just pause there. Courage and empathy.
Yeah, I love that. I love the marriage of the both. I think what we don't realize is the hardest part of our job is not about getting things done. It's about having influence and conversations that drive connection and trust. And somehow, whenever we are faced with easy performance discussions where somebody's so obviously doing a great job, we do a great job, right? We're able to show up and cheerlead, right? And as soon as we are faced by a challenging performance conversation, we buckle. And I think we need to start really asking ourselves when we are faced with a challenging conversation is, what kind of leadership is being required of me right now? And what kind of leader do I want to see myself as? Do I want to see myself as a fair weather leader? This is a term that I had a conversation with an HR leader about earlier this week, and it's only Tuesday. Do I want to see exactly. Do I want to see myself as a good weather leader, as a fair weather leader? Or do I want to see myself, and am I prepared to see myself as a leader to others through all weathers? And so how do I do that and show up effectively in easy times where we can all celebrate, and also in the times when some more difficult conversations need to happen? And those are the moments that really, truly test our leadership. And that's truly when we can really begin to call ourselves leaders, is when we are faced with a potentially difficult conversation And we know that in this conversation, me showing up authentically, courageously, and pathetically is also in service of the person in my team who needs to hear this from me. And sometimes we don't see that. I think
Yeah.
we see difficult conversations as a burden to us. What we don't see them as is a gift to those of our team who need someone to courageously hold a space for them and really see their potential for what it is.
Yeah. I love that. There's this one doctor, I'm trying to remember, I think she's like Dr. Afshali. I'm trying to remember. She had written some really incredible books, and she wrote it about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said, I hope that every parent has one difficult child. That is because that is the child that is going to make you grow the most as a human being. I think the same thing goes for leadership. I think that when you are having to face those more difficult conversations, when you're being tested, right? Like tested in a way, I think those are the moments in which you grow as a human and as a leader, right? And so in parenting and leadership, I think have a lot of correlation to them. Yes, there's definitely a through line there. But when we do have to face those difficult conversations, let's talk about what do we have in our toolkit that's available to us in terms of like how to approach it. So there are some wonderful frameworks that I have certainly encountered in my professional experience, and I call this the 2x2 framework. And this is something that I think is super common. And Afsheen, I'm sure you could speak to it a lot more than I can. I'm just a practitioner of it. But it's essentially the framework that you go into the conversation with, what are the two things that you're doing well? And then what are the two things that are areas of opportunity, again, for us. It's never about the employees swimming out there by themselves. It's for us to look into, and how do we help you get even better at it, right? And even the superstars on my team, even me, right? Like when I have my performance reviews, I always get the feedback, okay, here are the things that you need to lean more into, right? Explore more. And, it doesn't always have to be like, for example, for me, one of the years was, you just have to understand the business better. Like you just have to understand when I was new to the organization, like I came from a totally different industry. So that was my learning opportunity. That was in my area of opportunity. And I was like, yep, totally recognize that as a gap for me. And if I get better at that, I'll be even more effective in my ability to move the needle, right? So when you are faced with having to do that type of feedback, I do like that framework of the 2x2, two things that you're doing really well. So let's celebrate your wins too. And then let's look at what are the areas of opportunity and how do the organization, support you in helping you to really bridge the gap where you have, current gaps. So those are my thoughts on that piece.
That is awesome. And I love the framework. It's so simple and straightforward. Here's a couple of other things I would share. One is a good performance conversation begins with setting good goals. It's as simple as that. If you take the time to do really great goal setting at the beginning of the year, and I can honestly tell you, I know a very, very, maybe too many people. I know too many people who start the year off and are already into Q2 without any clear goals set. And so set clear goals so that you know what your, and don't wait for your manager to set your goals. Pursue clear goals. So here's the thing. I think we forget that it's a two-way conversation, right? There are two people involved in this journey and in this experience. And I think that if both people can take a level of responsibility and sort of lean in with each other, for each other, as and when, just so that clear goals can be set. And make sure that they are goals that are fully aligned with your direct report, or if you are the direct report, with your manager. And do that as soon as possible and as clearly as possible. The second piece for me is, don't just set, and you said this already, so I'm just going to reinforce it. Don't just set what goals, but set how goals as well. So once, and I've worked in many organizations that I've worked with only have one goals, right? Which is fine. However, it is the culture that drives performance. It's how much trust we have in the organization that drives discretionary effort. It's engagement. So there's a huge element of how that we can incorporate into the performance management process in order for us to ensure that we are coming at it from all sides in a holistic way. So set goals for the what and the how. That's the second piece I would say. I'll speak to my experience with the how, because this is what's coming in for me. In an organization I worked with, we had 7 values that they were called leadership values. And for example, one was act like an owner, right? Now, what we would do was we would link into our performance review what were the 2 or 3 hows that we would want to pursue. And that would become our goal, as well as the quantifiable goals that we set. And at the end of the year, well, throughout the year, we kind of get feedback and hear from our manager on how we're progressing with the how and the what as well. At the end of the year, we would actually, ourselves, the ones who wanted their performance conversation to happen with their managers, would send out an email to a group of our key stakeholders with the 7 values. It was a very simple email saying, could you give me feedback on what are the 2 values I do most well, right back to your Vicki framework, and what are the 2 values that would, if I improve, I would really benefit from. And we would get, and please give me examples of also, not just this would be a nice value, but this is when I saw you actually live into this value. And so having that was so super helpful in bringing to life, because I think the harder part of performance management is bringing to life the how than it is the what. And that was super helpful in bringing that to life for us. We get that feedback back from our stakeholders, and then we were able to then incorporate that into our performance reviews, which we would then update, and then we would take those to our leadership, whoever our direct managers were, or our direct reports would bring those to us, and then we would have a conversation on that. And that truly enables us to have more holistic performance management discussions as well. So that really was what was coming up for me as I was listening to you, in addition to what you shared.
Oh, I love that. And I love the way that you really brought it to life and made it very tangible, because, we talk about things in such a conceptual manner a lot of times, and we don't always necessarily translate it into real experiences, or into something that is something that is true and tangible to you. As you were talking, there was a thing that came up for me, and you said something about core values, right? Because this was a core value: act like an owner. And I love that, and I think that we don't talk enough about that in our performance management. So I'll give you an example of going way back. Very early on in my career, I used to work for Sapient. Now, Sapient has now taken on 1,000 different permutations and definitions of what it is. When I started, I knew the founders because I was in the Cambridge, Massachusetts office. So this is going back at least 20 years back, right, when the company was just founded. But one of our core values was openness.
Mm-hmm.
Openness. And we lived that core value to the fullest. And the way that the company would even live that core value is that every single doorway had an open arch in it. Everything had arches in it. And it was the way that we just lived that core value. And they really encouraged all of us to always be open, candid, and courageous in all of our conversations. So when we would have to say something really difficult to somebody, we would say, in the spirit of openness, I really need to tell you A, B, C, D, right? And that core value was lived to the absolute fullest. So I love the fact that you brought in core values as like something that you really can anchor people in and anchor in how you think about performance management. So that's one.
Thank you
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
much. I
Yes.
love that you shared that because it got me thinking not just about what I was saying in terms of within the conversation, but also because there are processes, there are um, there are institutions that reinforce even outside the performance management process how important certain values and behaviors are. And really they should all be reflective in 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 what it is that we're trying to translate to make our business results happen. I got to thinking of something as you were saying that. Another thing I was thinking about was, and this is just for those people who are listening really closely, which is another way to do the same values process or exercise is to choose what it is that I do super well, what it is I could do more of, what it is I could do less of, what it is that I could do differently.
Stop doing.
Start, stop, continue. Sorry, there you go. So I think another way to do the values conversation is to look at it from the perspective of start, stop, continue, and then gather that data and incorporate it into our performance management discussions. So there are so many beautiful and wonderful ways to make the how come to life in the performance management process. And that gets me thinking about, so while I'm talking about this, there's a little bit of a trigger going on inside of me, and I thought, let me be really clear and honest about why this is important to me. I was once working in an organization where I was leading a team, and the team that I took on, I joined them sometime in October, November, so last quarter of the year. And so when I inherited this team, they had a set of goals that was set for them at the beginning of the year that they had all been pursuing. And we knew that when I joined that the organization was at a pivotal moment where it would start pursuing some new directions and also some new priorities, which happens to many organizations, and now more than ever, more often than ever as well. However, I came in and it wasn't even 2 weeks, and I heard from our functional leader that what needed to happen was that we needed to measure employee performance based on the new direction that we were going to start taking. And there was a massive dissonance in me because here were some really well-meaning employees who had spent 10 months of the year pursuing a certain goal or set of goals, and I was being asked to assess their performance on a new direction. And even now, I'm still surprised that these conversations happen. It needs to be said that when goals are set, they need to, if they're going to be changed, employees need to have the opportunity to change their way and change their approach and change their performance in order to pursue the new goals. We cannot measure their performance based on goals they have not pursued. And so this is a really extreme example of what I was saying earlier, which is we need to set clear goals, fair goals that employees can pursue, and then give employees a fair chance to pursue them before we assess their performance as whether they've exceeded or achieved or fallen behind on the expectations that were set for them. So that just felt really important to say right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it is super important. And again, that transparency, we talk a lot about trust and transparency as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And even in performance management, that also comes into play, right? We talked about trust and transparency last week. And I think that having that transparency, clarity at the onset just sets everybody up for success, because then you know the North Star that you're working towards. So absolutely, Afsheen. The one last example I'll share from my career, and I think that this should really help people understand why it's not just about the what, like the hard outcomes that you're going to deliver, but also the how you're going to deliver it, why it matters, and why it makes such a huge difference in how you get rated at the end of the year. So if you have two top performance and you both are driving amazing business outcomes, driving revenue or operational efficiencies, or however you want to measure, right? Incredible NPS for your customers. Well, the performer that has the stronger how is always going to get the higher rating. Now, I'll give you an example, also an extreme example in my life, where I was working at an organization and they did luckily measure you on both the what and the how. Now, the what was for me to deliver a really complex customer experience at the end of the year. So we started off the year, we knew exactly the KPIs we were going to work towards, and really my success was successful implementation and launch of this really complex initiative. Now, midway through the year, markets had changed, they shifted, and there just wasn't as much budget in place to do something more innovative. And senior leadership decided, like I would say, 8 or 9 months into the year, that we were no longer going to move forward and that we were going to stop the initiative and we were going to stop the project, right? Now, this was like the big thing that I was driving that year. So at the end of the year, I was going to have literally nothing to show. So if you only looked at the what for my year, I would have had 0, right? Because if success was launch and there was no launch, then I have nothing to show for it, right? But in order for me to even get to that point, I had to work with finance, I had to work with decision science, I had to work with senior leaders, I had to influence, I had to determine, how do we want to think about the customer experience? So there was like strategic thinking involved. There was a multidisciplinary approach. There was working and influencing my stakeholders. There was a lot of alignment that I needed to find in the organization. There was like budgets that I needed to secure. I had to go to senior leaders, right? So there is a lot of how in order for me to even get to where we were. And at the end of the year, if you had taken a look at my what and other people's what, my what, like I didn't launch, right? So was I a failure? Absolutely not. I was still rated really, really high that year. I was rated as one of the top 2 or 5% of the performers in the organization. And the reason being was because of my how. Now, the what was out of my control, right? Like they cut the budget. So that was out of my control. But everything that was within my control, I did perform extremely high at. And as a result, the company still rewarded me and still gave me a really, really high rating. And so let this be an example for you to know why your how really, really matters. And I have to be super honest. For me, I always look at the how. And I'm very transparent about that. I always tell my team members, your how might be even more important to me than your what. Because if you're like delivering business outcomes, but you're like walking over dead bodies, or you're breaking and killing relationships, or you're not being a partner or collaborative, or you're not really thinking about the broader strategy, then the how is missing for me. And if the how is missing for me, I can't possibly rate you as a top performer. So that how is incredibly important, and maybe even more important, because if you have a super strong how, The what, I think, is just going to be a natural outcome of what you're doing. So I'll just pause
Yay.
there.
Amen to that, Vicki. And I guess my last sort of nugget of wisdom is when we're pursuing the how, while we're pursuing the what, we're also creating sustainable results. So, like you said, there are no dead bodies, along the way. So we have people who continue to be engaged with what it was that you did deliver and how you delivered it. You have not taken shortcuts in order to tick that box, and you've created sustainable infrastructures for whatever initiative it is that you're running to continue to run in the long term as well. So one of the things that I've discovered is that when leaders are managing to balance effectively the what and the how, these are the same leaders that are actually creating sustainable results for the business that will stay true and work for the business come hell or high water. And I think that's the reason that we should be acknowledged. That's the reason this performance gets rated higher. And that's the reason this performance gets recognized more. It creates long-term success.
Yes.
Yeah.
100% agree. Wow, what a conversation.
What a conversation. I think that was so wonderful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in the show notes the 2x2 framework, a little bit of a design of values and how you can discuss that using the what you did well and what you could do differently, so that if you want to use templates in order to help you manage those performance conversations, then you'll find those there in the show notes as well. Yay.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you, Afsheen. You're so full of wonderful insights.
There's a mutual fan
frameworks.
club here that we have, Vicki. Yay. Love that.
It's awesome. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for this very insightful conversation.
Oh, likewise, man. Likewise. Stay tuned because the best is yet to come.